Welcome to another episode of Tax Leaders Unplugged. Our guest today is Dominik Wellmann, and Dominik is the Global Head of Tax and Customs at Mercedes-Benz Group. Before, Dominik had many other tax leadership roles in this company, and he started his career at the German tax authorities. Dominik is also co-founder of TaxMates, which is a tax association for in-house tax leaders in Germany. Dominik is based in Stuttgart, Germany. In this episode, we will discuss the importance of marketing for the tax function, why tax teams should have a well-defined purpose, and why Dominik co-founded TaxMates.
This podcast is brought to you by LogTax.
LogTax is an autonomous control center for your global tax operations. It streamlines tax compliance with AI-driven insights and workflow automation. It helps to stay in control of tax risk and controversy management, and this system of action empowers tax teams with real-time analytics and regulatory updates, ensuring proactive business support. LogTax, on top of that, helps in-house teams to keep up with the digitalization that is happening at the site of the tax authorities. Transform your tax function with LogTax and ensure it is future-proof and AI-ready. Welcome, Dominik.
Welcome. Thanks, Stevie, for having me.
I heard that before you started at Mercedes-Benz, you got rejected twice. Tell us a bit, like, is this gossip true, or I'm curious.
So actually, it's no gossip at all. So I even tell my people, never give up your dreams, because as mentioned, I have been rejected twice. So first of all, I wanted to to study with Mercedes-Benz in some kind like dual studying, what you can do in Germany, and then they rejected me because maybe my grades out of school were not the very best. So I think maybe also as a motivation to everyone, it's not all about the grades that you have in school. And then I applied for another job where they said, you might not be the perfect fit. And then I applied for a third one, and that time I made it. So really, I applied twice, or have been rejected twice before they took me. And honestly, I wanted to reach out to HR department at one point and ask them why they really rejected me and if they regret not taking me earlier. But I think what it shows, you should never give up, and if you're really looking for something or striving for something, then follow your dreams.
That is indeed true. And you, I guess, really wanted to work at Mercedes-Benz. Is that the reason why you tried multiple times?
Yes, because of course in our region, so I'm coming out of the region of Stuttgart, and of course Mercedes-Benz is one of the biggest brands here. Of course, you have others like Porsche and Bosch, and also quite close to Stuttgart, you have HP and IBM and so on. So global national players. But Mercedes was one of my dreams, honestly. So I do not tell you the story that usually applicants tell me, in the sense of that their first little playing car was a Mercedes-Benz. So this was not true for me, but it was a shiny brand. And it still is, and a lot of people working for Mercedes. So I think it's really, honestly, I can say it was a dream working for Mercedes.
You started your career at the German tax authorities, and then you moved to house. Tell us a bit about how you started your career, and then what made you decide to go in-house, and how you experienced the change.
So why I started working for tax authorities was more or less, let's say, also the result that I have been rejected by Mercedes and other multinationals. So as mentioned, just to be honest, my grades out of school, they were okayish. They were not super, but they were okayish. And therefore I had to search for something. And for me, it was always crystal clear. I want to do something where I already start earning money while studying. And tax authorities offer this in Germany. So therefore I applied for dual study at the tax authorities. And it was really, and still is really, one of the best development paths that you can have in Germany when it comes to taxes. So, and after that, so the study is usually for 3 years. And after finishing it, I applied for a job as a tax auditor, which is not really common at these days, that you immediately after finishing your studies can work as a tax authority auditor. But luckily I made it because it was the need. And then I worked for around about 3 years as a tax auditor, which really helped me, also still helps me in my position now on the one hand side to understand how tax authorities think, what they're looking for, how they're acting, and especially as a preparation of the tax advisor exam in Germany, which I passed then 3 years later. The tax advisory exam itself, it was more or less, let's say, something I didn't really plan. At these days, I had a colleague and she always wanted to move to Switzerland. And she told me, Dominik, if I want to move to Switzerland as a tax advisor, I have to pass the tax advisor exam. And she asked me, would you like to join me? And I said, oh, okay, why not? And this is why I came, that I really then passed the tax advisor exam. And once having it passed, I then realized, okay, with such a certification and such an education, you should not stay with tax authorities. Especially that in these days, your careers in the tax authorities were not really linked to your performance, but more or less also to the grades that you had while you were studying and by the end of the exam and the studying phase. And then I moved out in a, let's say, more or less smaller tax advisory firm. And I did for around about 3 to 4 years, let's say, normal tax advice in the sense of I had clients and I gave them tax advice in each and every area. So VAT, corporate income tax, so whatever you name it, wage tax, making balance sheets and so on and so on. And then at one point, I decided after 2 or 3 years, oh, it's getting boring a bit. I want to educate a bit more. And then I decided to apply for the International Tax Advisor exam in Germany, which is something you can do on top of the tax advisor exam. And after passing this, I, of course, wanted to concentrate and specialize a bit more in a sense of international tax. And this was then the reason why I applied at Mercedes for an international tax manager role, which I then received. You ask about the transition a bit. I think it was always a bit special. So on the one hand side, coming from tax authorities and then working for a tax advisor, because you're completely shifting the view. Now you're not the person searching for things that have gone wrong in the tax declaration or in tax returns. You're more or less the one trying to do it right. It really helped me understand at some point why things are sometimes not right in tax returns, why it's hard to make everything right. So looking at data, for example, and stuff like that. Nevertheless, it also helps me, and still today, it helped me to had all these previous roles. So on the one hand side, the role as a tax advisor in the middle advisor firm, and also having the role as a tax auditor. So having these different views and now combined with the industrial view as a global head of tax really helps me each and every day.
Yeah. Because indeed my question, which I wanted to raise was like, would your career have been different if you would not have started at the tax authorities? Or how has this shaped you now as a head of tax, knowing that it all traces back to your start at the German tax authorities?
I think it would definitely have been different in such a sense that I would not have had so much, let's say, understanding for the position of the tax authorities, because at some point knowing how they work and what they have to deliver and what pressure they also have on their side, it makes me, let's say, much more, or it gives me much more confidence in the relationship to the tax authorities. I would say that we at Mercedes have a very, very good relationship with tax authorities. And I'm really telling my people this is something I want to keep, because those guys at tax authorities, they are also just making their jobs, and they have to make their jobs. And of course, they have to audit us, and there is no way around. So we should not, let's say, argue in a sense of that they should go away or whatever. I think this, acknowledging this on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, also to stay a bit humble, because if you, let's say, have experienced what it means working for tax authorities and working for smaller advisory firms, you also appreciate at one point what you really have working in such a tax department like the tax department for Mercedes-Benz. So in all purposes, in regard to freedom of work, in regard to payment, and so on, and so on, and so on. So therefore, I definitely would not miss it. And maybe the last point, and as mentioned, this is one of the most important points also, is the education that you're getting when you're doing or when you're studying in this combined approach. This is really outstanding. So I think this is the basis that also today helps me still a lot. Although I'm quite far away from my studying and from my tax advisor exam. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot, and it resonates a lot. I hear that often that getting started at the tax authorities is it's maybe different than the Big Four, but you also get trained very well at the tax authority. So this is something that you then have for the rest of your career as a bonus. And on top of that, I like it a lot that you refer to the fact that now you can put yourself in their shoes. You know how they think. You would also appreciate their work. They also have obviously their objectives. So I think that is interesting as well. Would you maybe promote getting started at the tax authority still in this day and age for junior tax people, which we may maybe have in the audience? Like, do you still think in this day and age it's a good start of the career as an alternative
Yeah,
to, say, maybe Big Four?
yeah, definitely, definitely. So especially if you're looking at the let's say compensation that you're getting while you're studying, I think this is still quite well when you work for tax authorities, and I would still recommend this to people. Of course, I cannot so proactively recommend this because also tax authorities need their, let's say, future talents. So I cannot tell them go and make the studying for the tax authorities and then then come back. But
Yeah.
it's still a good basis. And I think additionally, so the one thing that is a bit missing, but I think this has changed in the last couple of years is when I did my studies and when I worked for tax authorities, of course, you were very much focused on national tax law. And
Mm.
there was not the chance of getting something international or going abroad. I think this has also changed. So therefore also good opportunities maybe to get an exchange with tax authorities in other countries. Um, and additionally, what I really like is that when you're studying with tax authorities, you're really just focused on taxes. Of course, you have some kind of economics and a bit of controlling, but not as much as in the other areas. On the one hand side, of course, it's also important to know this, but especially in Germany, when it comes, for example, of question um, not just how something is handled from a tax purpose in a sense of, okay, how is this treated from a VAT perspective or for a corporate income tax perspective, but also in addition, how does this really work, let's say, in the complete sense of tax law? So meaning in German it's called Abgabenrecht. I'm searching for the right expression in Germany. So just a simple question is, or are tax authorities really allowed to file a tax assessment note? And this is
Mm.
something, of course, tax authorities have to take care of this because, let's say, they have the mandate of the government to collect taxes. But are they really allowed to send you a tax assessment note? And this is something, a special form of law you are just learning more or less, or where you get deeper learnings when you are working for tax authorities because you have to fulfill them. As a tax customer or taxpayer, you usually trust that whenever you receive a tax assessment note, that the process of receiving it is really okay. And we very much focus on the content. So is the calculation right? Is it the right tax rate and so on? But really the question, are they really allowed to send me this note? And what I recognized also in my past working for Mercedes-Benz, we had some cases where tax authorities were not legally allowed to send us a tax assessment note, although the content was right, but they were legally not allowed because the time was up and so on and so on. And
Yeah.
just also knowing about this stuff really, really helps you. And this is something that you, let's say, from a deeper development get when you're working for tax authorities or when you're doing the, let's say, the studies for tax authorities. So therefore, I would still recommend it to each and everyone. But on the other hand side, it also has pros and cons. So I'm really, as I said, I'm really missing the international aspect, which I didn't have, where I really struggled a bit with myself and asked myself, would it have been better to work for one of the big fours, for example?
Yeah. No, makes sense. And I guess to your point, pros and cons, like you would have for every alternative at the table when you start your career. So great. Um, Dominic, so I know that you are very much an advocate or a fan of marketing the tax function, putting the tax function on the map and making sure that, yeah, the perception of the in-house tax function is as good as it can be. Tell us a bit like what does that mean for you, the marketing of the in-house tax function, and how do you apply it at Mercedes-Benz?
So, so spontaneously, there comes one slogan in my mind: "Do good things and tell about it." And I think this is what tax people usually do not do. So very often, and I compare it a bit, maybe thinking about pictures or metaphors. I compare our function in the past a bit like, let's say, a construction worker, someone who is let's say building tables out of wood or stuff like that. So someone you reach out and tell him, hey, could you build me a table? And then he builds the table and he sells it to you, and everything is fine. So we are used to do our job, doing a good job in the let's say in the back offices. And I really often hear, and this is also what I heard from my board when I started my new role as a global head of tax. And I think very many people of you know this, that the board says we are always happy when we do not hear anything from you, because then we know that everything is going right and everything is compliant. And this
Yeah.
is how our role is very often seen. And the problem is that it just concentrates on the compliance piece. And of course, no one wants to hear something from the tax department when it comes about the compliance piece, because this is our, let's say, the basis that what we have to do. But we are bringing so much value to the business, and also with currently the same mindset. So in the sense of, we are bringing value, we are providing good tax advices, we are bringing, let's say, restructuring ideas and so on and so on. But we never stand in front of, let's say, the project and tell them, hey, listen, this was our earning from a tax perspective. Yeah, we provided additional value to the company of XYZ million. And very often, let's say, and this is no blaming and bashing, but very often the M&A guys and other departments, yeah, they, let's say, they collect and they receive the appraisal for it, and everyone says, hey, great project, very well done. And we're just clapping our shoulders on our own, say, okay, we also provided good input. And I think what we definitely should do, we should try to bring our value more to the attention, to the board, to the C level. And what we are, for example, trying is that whenever we are in projects, of course, we have different reporting streams, like on the one hand side, reporting in the organization via M&A, for example, but also I'm using my regular communication with my CFO to directly also bringing some good news, in a sense of, listen, this is where we brought really value to the project. And what we currently are doing is not only just providing simple figures in the sense of, okay, this helped us to save XYZ taxes, but to more or less think about what is the important figure for my CFO, for example. So, and it might be something like, okay, by this, we saved so much money, and this means that the shareholder value increased by XYZ. Or this means that you can now increase the dividend for the shareholders next year by XYZ. And
Yeah.
although these are maybe sometimes just small numbers, but it gives a bit more a feeling what we are really doing, because usually we are dealing with such high numbers and no one is really aware what this means for the company. And just, let's say, talk the language of the business and know, okay, what is important for them, and what is, let's say, what is the KPI where they would say, oh, okay, I understand this really brought value to my business. Not just
Yeah.
telling, okay, we avoided additional taxes, but make it a bit more tangible for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry that I maybe stop you here a bit, but I want to replay what you said in the beginning, which resonates a lot, which is like, do good things and tell about it. But you at the same time said, like, many tax teams, they struggle doing it. So they don't tell about it. They do probably the good things, but they don't tell about it. You then refer to maybe one of the root causes, which is board or senior management. They are happy if they don't hear about tax, because then probably everything is under control. However, it only applies to the compliance side of things. What are maybe other root causes that we struggle to tell about all the good things we do? Is it indeed the technicality and maybe not speaking the right language, as you were just explaining? Or are there other root causes? In other words, what can people in the audience do to more successfully tell about all the good things they do?
I think we, on the one hand side, I think you're right. Of course, we are very much focused on technical, on the technical side of things, and we are not marketing guys, right? So this is where we, let's say, by nature are very humble. So we are usually not the ones standing in front and telling everyone, "Hey, we really did the great job. We are the best organization within the company," and so on
And
and so
why
on.
why would
Because
we be why are we humble, you think? Because in the end we are all the same
I
human. Why are tax
yeah,
people
I think yeah, I think so. Referring to our organization, I can tell you that when I started working here for Mercedes-Benz a couple of years ago, we very often were upset of such a behavior of marketing and controlling, for example, because with such an attitude, they pushed for business cases and for projects which maybe at some point didn't make any sense, but they stand in front of the crowd and told everyone, this is the best thing, we definitely should do it, you have to do it. And after 2 or 3 years, it turned out that nothing of this was true. And therefore, at some points, we were, of course, a bit, okay, this is not us. We're delivering to 100% perfect results, perfect returns, and whatever. And we are not standing in front in a sense of self-marketing. And then on the other hand side, I think the problem is really a bit due to the fact that we are so much concentrated on the technical side of tax, starting from the education. So you never start when you're studying tax, you never start, or at least I do not know any kind of lesson where someone is telling you, okay, on the one hand side, you have to understand the technical part of taxes, but you also have to be aware that your counterpart is not only the tax authorities where you can speak tax language, it's also the business, it's your customers, and you have to understand they don't know about the articles and the paragraphs. And for them, it's irrelevant. They don't care about whether this is in section 8, lit B, whatever. They just want to know the result. And I think this is where we have to start in an early beginning when people are, let's say, starting with a business life, to tell them, okay, you learned now about the technical content. This is very important. But now you need to learn how to communicate this technical content in easy words to your business partner. And then, of course, also stand in front of the audience, stand in front of the board, be bold and tell them, hey, listen, and this is exactly what we should do, and this is where we are bringing value. And I
is
think this is a bit, yeah,
is
it's
this
just one last thing. Yeah.
yeah, is this
So
something
sorry
that you
to,
is this something that you include in, let's say, the package of training that you provide to new joiners? Like tell them how to pitch, tell them how to present properly, how to bring a message across? Or is this something which is not yet included in how you manage your team and the upskilling of the team?
no, it's not. It's not officially included. But what I'm pushing my people is whenever someone is reaching out to me in the sense of, hey, there's a topic which we would like to address to the board, I tell them whenever you are preparing slides, whenever you are preparing recommendation, on the one hand side, I want to see, let's say, a bridge building up the golden circle. So in the sense of, you should tell me why are you here, and not in a sense of I want to inform you, but why does this make sense for the company? What are you proposing and how do you get there? So this is for me very important, that the people are really, let's say, learning to figure out the purpose and the purpose for their business partner. And then secondly, I ask them, okay, understood. And now give me a link to our overall company strategy. So, and this is quite hard for the people sometimes because the strategy, of course, is a bit more abstract and a bit more far away from text. But by making this link, they start thinking about, okay, what is now really important for my counterpart? What is important for the business? What do they want to know? And by this, well, at least what I recognize by this, they're getting more and more used to learn a bit the language of the business partners, and also to think a bit more about what do our business partners really need as information, and to be convinced and so on. But I think talking about it, I think it definitely would make sense that we would, whenever we would have newcomers, and let's say, to do some kind of training. But I'm not, let's say, I'm not a real supporter of formalizing everything, because of course there are also a lot of people, don't get me wrong, a lot of people who are doing this really pretty well already. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I think one could always do better. So maybe I should think about, let's say, doing some kind of studying or in-house, whatever.
And so it seems that you are on the right track in your organization. Tell me a bit like what are the advantages that you have observed of being, let's say, being able to communicate well, to sell all the good things you are doing, be very transparent about it. Can you give a couple of concrete outcomes?
Yeah, I think the most is that the tax function or tax and custom function in my case is more appreciated by the company, which definitely leads to the fact that you are involved in each and every project and decision right from the beginning.
Yeah,
Because what I recognized in the past is that very often projects are going on, and then at some points they recognize, oh, we have to ask tax. Oh, okay, we have to include them also. And this usually at a point when nearly all the decisions have already been made, and you try to clean up the mess afterwards, and let's say
yeah,
structure it as best as possible. And my wish would be that the people will reach out to us and tell us, hey, listen, we have an idea. Can you help us further evaluate this idea? What kind of, let's say, options do we have? And I think the advantage is of tax departments and also people working in tax departments. So we are usually not just, let's say, focused on our text content, but we have a broader view. We have the big picture. So at some point, when you're educated in text, you not only learn how you, let's say, have to fill out a tax return or what the tax consequences are out of a project. You also have some kind of economical view on this, right? So you are also challenging the business case itself. You are bringing other ideas like, okay, might it make sense to do this and that way to change the flow of supply parts and whatever. So, and I think this is a value. And once people recognize that it makes sense to reach out to the tax department because we are not the ones throwing stones in their way and showing roadblocks, but more or less searching for solutions and providing solutions. And then it's much more easier because if you're at the beginning part of a project, it's much more easier to bring your points, also to fulfill your compliance. You can show on the one hand side, of course, there's some red line we should definitely not cross. This is the compliance part. But nevertheless, we have a lot of options and idea how we could also bring business from a tax purposes, but also from other, for other let's say departments and functions. And I think this is for me the main thing, right? So besides, of course, everyone likes to be appreciated, right? And it's
yeah.
also great when you have whatever some kind of company get-togethers and you're telling, okay, I'm from the tax department, and not everyone is just rolling with their eyes. Okay, yeah, the boring tax guys, but it's more or less, great, yeah, you are the ones that saved my business case or whatever. So I think everyone likes to be appreciated. And
Does it also help to get more easily the resources and the budget you need in the organization? Do you think it's also linked there too?
I think it makes it a bit more easier in a sense of that you do not have to explain what value you're bringing to the business. Of
Yeah,
course, of course. At some point, I think you could also say when people do not know what you are doing, it might also have some little advantages in a sense of you can tell, oh, I need this to ensure the compliance. So, and now coming back to the sentence, we do not want to hear from you. Of
yeah,
course, from a threat, this also had some kind of threatening potential that you can say,
yeah.
I need the resources because I have to fulfill the compliance.
Otherwise,
Nevertheless,
you.
I think
Yeah,
Nevertheless, I think I would really more prefer, let's say, seeing the value and let's say coming to the conclusion, okay, it makes sense to put resources in this organization and this department because on the one hand side, they will, let's say, cover us and cover the compliance. And on the other hand side, they will bring so much value to the business that it definitely makes sense. So of course, this would be the preferred option. Yeah.
and how do you measure the value? Do you have like very practical recommendations from the audience? Like, do you keep spreadsheets, trackers, presentations towards CFO or other senior management members to convince them about the entire value footprint your team has delivered? Because I can,
So we are start.
yeah, it can be tricky to measure the exact value,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes. So, and this is exactly the point where we are also currently working on. So, I think it started in the last couple of months, or it accelerated a bit when all these customs issues or tariff issues came up between the US and Europe. So because there was, let's say, a lot of pressure and a lot of attention on my function, and I think this was the first time where we really very much in a sense of a regular reporting reported figures to the board. So what does this mean? What could we do, and so on. As mentioned, where we are currently working on is think about other, let's call it KPIs or numbers that might be catchy numbers for the boards. Like, for example, what is the influence on the dividend? What is the influence on the cash flow, for example? And what we are already doing since a couple of years is some kind of, let's say, monthly reporting to our board. So not in a sense of telling them what we do, but more or less in a sense of telling them where are we part of projects, what was our tax advice, and we are also, let's say, putting numbers in there in the sense of, okay, what was now the benefit that we brought to the company. But this is more or less still on a very abstract, and it's not a consolidated. I think something like you have in mind or something you were mentioning might definitely be great, like a dashboard. I do not want to use the buzzword and not another dashboard, but I think in a sense of this is the value that we additionally brought to the company from the 1st of January since now. And then one example, project ABC. Yeah. But I think once more, I think it's different from company to company because you have to figure out who's your business partner and what is he really interested in. And if you have a CFO, for example, who's very much in cash flow and in shareholder value, you might report in a complete different way than someone who is just focused on the EBIT, for example, right? And if you have someone who is just interested in the compliance piece, I think it's completely different. You should show him how early you deliver your tax returns and how minor the outcome of a tax audit might be, for example, and how good your risk management is. And I think that this is the important part, coming back to marketing of tax, not having one standard report or one standard, let's say, marketing instrument, but really focusing on what is the need for your business partner. Or for example, when I'm talking to our board member responsible for sales and distribution, for example, and let's say, whenever I'm in contact with him, I'm showing him, okay, what kind of tax law change is currently in discussion, and how might this lead to an increased sales numbers, because people might decide to buy a car because they get such kind of tax benefit, and this is completely different, right? And my CFO does not necessarily on the first step wants to know about the sales. He might be more interested about, okay, what do additional depreciations bring to our company, and so on. And therefore, I think it's important. Just always ask yourself first, who's my business partner and what is the important thing for him? And then you should, let's say, customize it at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, super clear. I think for the audience as well, very insightful. I know, Dominik, that you also are a big promoter of having a well-defined purpose as a tax team. And I know, obviously, every company has a vision, a purpose. And you would expect that at the let's say company level, but explain a bit like why is it so important as a tax function to have also a purpose at that level, and tell us a bit about the one you're having in your company.
Yeah, I think why I think it is important is everyone, of course, wants to know why he is here in my department and why he's working for my department. And I think this is, let's say, no rocket science, that whenever you know why you're doing something, you're much better in doing so on the one hand side, and I think you're also much more confident. And I think just think back when you were a small child, or when your kids were at a younger age, and they always ask you why do I have to do it? Because they want to understand the purpose. And once you're telling them, okay, you have to brush your teeth because then you stay healthy and so on, and then they might agree. And I think this is completely the same. When you are working, at least at some points, I ask myself, why am I really doing this? And when I'm in contact with my people, or when we started, let's say, our way to our purpose, of course, most of the people immediately ask, we are here to fulfill tax compliance and tax declaration. And I think this is not the why. This is what we are doing, but this is not the why. And I think 6 years ago, we started a journey, or I initiated this journey with my predecessor and his leadership team to find about our why and our purpose. And the outcome was that our purpose is turn knowledge into value and trust. And what it says is, on the one hand side, of course, we are an expert function. So this is the knowledge part, right? And now it's not just turning this knowledge into trust, which means more or less fulfilling our compliance. And by doing good compliance, building a trustful relationship, not only to the tax authorities, but also to the top management. Yeah. So think about whenever we do not hear something about you, it's okay. And now the second part, and this is exactly the value. So turn knowledge into value and trust. So I would like my people, when they show up each and every day here, that they say, okay, why am I here? I have a huge tax knowledge, and now I want to turn this tax knowledge into value for the company. Yeah, and not just providing solid compliance advice, but also bringing advice to the company, to the project, and by this to create value for the company. And this is more or less how our purpose has been defined. Honestly, I have to say, I'm of the opinion it still fits. Nevertheless, I think after 5 or 6 years, we could think about another one. But I still like it, and I think also my people, most of the people know it, so we also printed it out a bit. Yeah, and of course, what we also did is, and you refer to it, each and every company has a purpose. And what I recognized when we started this journey, when I thought, might it be worthy to think about a purpose for the tax department? This was the first time when I recognized that really nearly each and every large company has a purpose. Also the big fours, for example. And this is something, so very often you read these purposes, but you never think about it or spend a minute thinking about it, what it really means. Yeah, and then, as I said, we started our journey, and for us, the important thing to create this purpose together, not with the whole team, unfortunately. So this is something I would have done different now if I would do it again, but at least with the leadership team. And let's say this was more or less the outcome. The turn knowledge into value and trust. It's also one thing that, let's say, has a bit link to our overall company purpose, which is first move the world. So in a sense of turning like moving. So this is where we also found some bridge to the overall purpose of Mercedes-Benz.
And what would you recommend to tax leaders and in-house teams that don't have a purpose yet? How to get started? What should the soul searching be like? What are the practical recommendations you have?
So I would start with watching the YouTube video of Simon Sinek about the Golden Circle, because this is exactly how it started with me. Back in 2018, I had the opportunity to join some kind of leadership seminar, which we did these days in the company. And I was first confronted with the Golden Circle of Simon Sinek, and it really catched me. And I'm not quite sure whether you know this YouTube clip. So it's about a TED talk he did, I think, 15 or 16 years ago already. But I think it's still valued. And let's say the example he takes with Apple, of course, comparing Apple to Dell, companies at these days, which, let's say, had the same idea of bringing out in these times. It was, what was it? It was the iPod, right? And Dell had a similar device, but even better. But Apple did better in a sense of selling it, and all based on the Golden Circle. And once you have understood a bit about the Golden Circle and get this as an inspiration, I think it should become clear to the people why it might make sense to have this also. And this was for me the starting point. And also when I started thinking about our purpose and creating our purpose, I first showed all the people this 5 or 6 minute clip from Simon Sinek, so that they really understood why it makes sense to have such a purpose. And I did never ever met someone who told me, I do not want to know about the purpose. I do not know why I'm here and why I'm on earth, or whatever. You can make it philosophically. So this would be my recommendation. And once you've checked this video and you say, okay, this doesn't make any sense for me, I do not believe in it, then leave it. Yeah, then it doesn't make sense. But I think most of them would agree and say, okay, it might make sense to spend a couple of minutes on it.
Yeah, and I think for the younger generations in particular, it will be very attractive to have a strong purpose, because more and more we all know, like, they are the ones where they come to work exactly for that purpose, right? So the career path and the, let's say, remuneration is one thing, but they also very much need a purpose. Otherwise, they will leave anytime soon. So that's very useful. You are also the co-founder of TaxMates, an association for in-house tax leaders in Germany. Tell us a bit like why did you start with it and what are the activities you do? What is the value it brings to the in-house community in Germany?
So it's first of all, it's not some kind of like an official organization or stuff like that. It is more or less a label that we gave some kind of collaboration hub or collaboration, let's say, circle we have, and it was more or less. So I, if you can say, founded it, but the idea was more or less created 2 or 3 years ago by a co-taxmate and myself. And it was more or less, let's say, during the Corona crisis, when we were all working from home, I started to have some kind of regular exchange with other tax leaders in other multinationals. And we got to know each other from conferences before and so on. And then there was one session, and there this idea was more or less born because we aligned to have a meeting and to discuss about a couple of things, how you're doing this technically wise, and so on and so on. So it was very much focused at the beginning on tax tech, and then it turned out that in this session it was for 1.5 hours. Just everyone used this session to, let's say, talk a bit about what is currently going on in their head and what is really, let's say, occupying them in a sense of emotions and stuff like that. So we did not talk about tax and tax topics. It was more or less, oh, I'm struggling with this mindset and he has this attitude and so on and so on. And what we recognized afterwards, it was some kind of let's say a circle that you usually have with people when you have problems, yeah. So, and what we recognize is really that we had such a trustful atmosphere, and we also afterwards reached out to each other, not only when we had tax technical topics or tax tech topics. It was more or less about, let's say, the yellow things like, I'm struggling currently with this leadership, this leadership situation, or I'm currently struggling with this attitude, or do you have any idea? I have to convince my CFO about whatever. And this was more or less where we found out, besides all the tax technical topics and the tax tech topics, we are also, as tax people, struggling with mindset, with culture, with leadership. And therefore, we said, okay, we need some kind of collaboration, some kind of, let's say, closed circle where we have such a trustful atmosphere that we also talk about things like this. And this was where the idea of TaxMates was more or less created, that we said, okay, let's build this circle. Let's just have it with people we know, people we trust. So it's some kind like a closed circle where we say we have such a trustful atmosphere, we have such a trustful exchange that we do not want to make it like an open circle where everyone can join, because it's important to keep this trustful relationship. And this is how it was set up, more or less. And I think currently, so we limit it to a certain number of people, because what we also recognize is that whenever the audience or the group is too large, it doesn't bring any value anymore. So therefore, we limited it a bit, and usually we are around about 15 to 20 people joining the sessions. We meet 2 or 3 times a year, and as mentioned, just discussing whatever comes people into mind. One might have questions in regard to a tech IT project. One might have other questions, but as mentioned, not talking about tax technical content, of course, not sharing any kind of company information. So it's more about, let's say, the softer topics where we usually like marketing for tax, for example. Yeah, talking about this. Hey, do you have any idea, or so on?
No, that's interesting. And what I observe is that in all of the countries that I talk to people, there is always a very close community of tax leaders that get together. And there is so much friendship, like deep relationships, people that really trust each other and that share information. So I'm wondering, like, is this something which you expect also to be there for, let's say, finance and marketing and sales functions, or is this something where we tax people are a bit different from the other functions, and what could be the reason for that?
Good idea, or a good question. So Honestly, I do not know whether this might also be interesting for other functions, or maybe they already have it. So I think it's a bit, and let's say coming back to what we just discussed a couple of minutes ago, why do we need marketing for tax and so on? I think as a or within our tax function, we are usually also from our education point of view, we're so much focused on the tax technical topics that at some point we do not get the education about all these other soft topics, let's call it like this. And maybe marketing and sales right from the beginning, they have more like, how do I present? How do I get into a leadership role? How do I lead people and so on? And I think let's say my experience at least is that in the tax function, you are promoted, you get development based on your tax technical skills and not so often on all your other soft skills. And I think this is getting more and more important. And I think therefore maybe we also set this up and it might make sense, but yeah, no idea. I think collaboration and exchange makes sense for each and everyone, right? So, but maybe the others are already doing better because they're a bit better in, let's say, showing what they can do and so on.
But I think you're right that in one way our domain is so technical that probably most of our headspace gets consumed by the technicality of the domain, and then there is little headspace left to think about the softer topics. That might be an explainer, but in any case, I like the idea of having such an in-house or an inner circle, so to say, of in-house leaders, which you can have sounding boards and exchange experiences. Not about the tax technical stuff, because there is so much content about that out there, but more about indeed leadership, problems you experienced, etc., etc. I think, Dominik, so we are by the end of the conversation here. I really, really, really enjoyed the conversation. I'm really impressed about the leadership information that you shared here, the knowledge, all the practical tips and tricks. So thanks for that. I have one final question for you, which I raise always at the end of the podcast, which is if you would have one piece of advice for people in the audience, people that are listening in, that want to excel in their tax career, what would it be?
I think it would be really simple. Just always do what you love. Do not do something just to get promoted, or do not fulfill a role where you think I have to do this because this would be appreciated or whatever. Just always follow your heart and what you would like to do and what you would love to do. And then it will automatically become a development, and then maybe also at the end of the promotion. So at least this is what I tell my people, and this is also what I experience. I have always been the best part of myself, and I did what I loved. I did not maybe develop or get promotions as fast as as other persons, but at the end of the day, let's say reaching the final position I'm now in, I was much faster with just always doing what I love.
I like it. It's simple to understand. I'm not sure whether it always is easy to implement, because obviously I can imagine that sometimes you need to do things that you don't really like or love, but I get the gist of it. I like it. Thanks a lot for the conversation, Dominik.
Thank you for having me, Stevie.